It was 1970, I believe, when I accepted the pastorate of the King's Church. I had been preaching revivals in that general area, and some of those people had visited the revival from the King's Church and had heard me preach. And so I felt like a change was coming. We had been evangelizing, and I felt like a change was coming. I felt like there was an end coming to evangelizing, but I didn't know what that end was. I was 25 years old, so I didn't have a lot of things to measure by. But we had begun to pray about making a change. We just didn't have any ideas as to what it might be. And I was preaching revival on Airport Road in Jonesville, Louisiana. And I had preached that first weekend there. And on a Monday, we were staying at my dad and mom's house. And I had a car drive up, and I was out in the yard. Had a car drive up, and three guys that I really didn't know got out of the car and met me there at the yard fence. And one of them I had seen, the other two I'd never seen. And they told me they were from the King's Church, and they were searching for a pastor. We had no telephone. We didn't even have a landline at that time, so they had to drive and find my dad's house and find us. They asked if we would be interested in coming and preaching for a weekend. And I said, I think so. So that following Saturday night, we drove to the King's Church. It was a country church, and we had been there one time, and we felt like it was kind of out of the way from where we lived. And my wife made the comment after the one time we had preached in that building. She said, I hope God never brings us to a place like this, because it's so out of the way and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people out here. But we did preach that Saturday evening, and there was a great moving of the Spirit. I knew in the moment when I walked to the pulpit and opened my Bible, I knew that we were to become the pastors of that church. We were elected immediately, almost the next day or two. We were elected to the pastorate there at King's. This was about 9 miles, I suppose, out of Wisner, and it was strictly a country church. And I don't know, they were probably running 65 people there, I'm guessing. I don't remember specifically, but it was a good church. They were good people. They had a trailer beside the church that we moved in, and was thankful to have our own place. It was a 12 by 60 mobile home, and we had 2 children. Tammy and Darren were already born. It was during this same time that Katrina was born there at the King's Church. We at being 25, we didn't know much about pastoring a church. We had a lot of enthusiasm, had a lot of dreams, ambitions, vision. But as far as knowing how to pastor a church, I knew very little about it. You couldn't have told me that then, because I really felt like I had all the answers, of course. At 25, it's difficult to say I don't know. But we did accept that, and we were there for 2 years. They treated us very kindly. We had heard that it was not a great church to pastor, that they were hard on preachers, but for the 2 years that we were there, they were not hard on us. They were very kind, very understanding, and we had continual revival. There was a great ingathering, a great harvest in that community. And so we were very, it was one of the better seasons of our life. Nobody gave us problems there. they act like, and they were smart people, they acted like I was a gift from God. Whether I was or not, now that I look back, I doubt that I was a very valuable gift, but we were definitely sincere. We were definitely there to do the best that we could. We offered them everything we had. They supplied our needs. We didn't leave there with any money, but God took care of us while we were there, and they were careful to supply our needs and to take care of us. It was a wonderful experience for us. It gave us a platform to have revival, to reach out in the community, and we love those people and love those who are still left to this day. They were good people. It was May, I think, after we'd been there 2 years. It was in the early part of the spring that one night we were in revival. Billy and Brenda Hale was preaching us revival there at King's, and we were praying after church, which was a kind of a common practice then. We would stay and pray after church. The preachers would, and so we. In prayer that night, I felt like the Lord spoke to me and told me that I was to leave there, resign the church, and leave there and move to Wisner, and which was the small town, 1,200 people, I guess, and start a church. There was no Pentecostal church there. And I certainly had no sense of how to leave a church. I didn't know how to get a church. I didn't know how to leave a church. And I certainly was too wise to seek advice at 25, 27. And so I just got up on a Sunday night in the midst of a great revival. Billy asked me if it'd be all right if he left before I made the announcement. And so they left that morning, I believe, and that Sunday night I made the big announcement without telling anybody but my wife. I made the big announcement that we would be leaving the church, resigning the church, and would be moving to Wisner, and 9 or 10 miles away, and starting a new church. It was an abrupt change. I had no plans for Wisner. I had no place to live. I had no income. I had no place to have church in Wisner, but God takes care of ignorant people who move by faith to do whatever they feel like God's told them to do. I was very sure of what God had spoken to me. I wish I'd been more wise in how I handled the people who were there, who had been so kind to us, so good to us, but I was a visionary. I was young and was strictly a visionary. I was not good at looking back over my shoulder. I was not good at explaining my vision nor my feeling that I'd heard the voice of God. And so I never went back to service there. We moved out of the trailer and moved to Wisner. A man furnished us a trailer in Wisner and said, as long as you live here, you can live here for free. Went and bought us a new 12 by 60 mobile home. And by then we had 3 children. And I went into town looking for a place to have church. I had no money. I mean, no money. And the funds had cut off from the King's Church. So I went into town. On my way there, I met a man who flagged me down in the middle of the highway and said, last night, my wife woke up in the night and said the Lord spoke to her and told her to send you this $500 check. And so I accepted that, went on into town, looked for a place, found I was actually looking maybe to rent a storefront, but I found a little piece of property right in the edge of town. It wasn't a great place, but it was over the tracks, and wasn't considered a very desirable area, I guess, but they had a metal building there, green metal building, and it had a couple of acres, 2 point something acres of land with it, and they had been erecting temporary buildings on the inside of this building. And it was for sale. I believe they wanted $8,500 for it. And I went and visited the agent, who was also the mayor of the town, Mr. Watson. I visited with him, and he said, I'll sell it to you. We'll seal this deal today. So I went around to the bank, Franklin State Bank, and he said, do you have anything down? I said, I have $500. And he said, all right, we'll do it. I knew him, and we got in contact with Mr. Watson, who owned the property. He came around, and we signed papers. We bought that metal building, 2.3, 2.4 acres, and which we thought was plenty at that time. We didn't know what we would need, but we bought that building and started having church that weekend. We got some old theater seats from an old theater downtown Wisner that had closed, got some seats out of there, moved them onto the concrete floor, and built a big old tall platform or some kind of a table that was there. We reconstructed it to be a platform, and we started having church. I don't remember the exact number we had, probably right off the bat with all of our family and everybody we could cajole to be there, probably 40 people on that first Sunday. So we began with a small number of people, but people who were enthusiastic and wanted to help us build a church in Wisner. I look back with a lot of pleasantness on those days, the days of being at King's, the revival we had, the days of leaving there. Those people were very angry at us. Some of them had not even known any other pastor but me. Many of them had not experienced a great revival there, and they had prayed for that for years. Had a very fine man who preceded me there, and he and his wife, Brother and Sister Parker, they had sown a lot of prayer and tears and sacrifice into that church with many other people, of course, over the years. But we came in and reaped. I was a reaper, and we reaped the result of all the things that they had done there. So there was some resentment at King's, and they were very against us building a church in Wisner. I had no idea how to put any salve in that wound at that age. I just moved, and we started, and God blessed us. We had a lot of persecution. They did not want a Pentecostal church in Wisner. They felt like they had Pentecostals out in the country on both sides, and they didn't need a church there. But I felt like God had called me, and was very opinionated, very hard-headed about just hearing what God said, and felt like I should do it and consult nobody. So I started the church, and God was merciful and kind to us, and sent us immediate revival and growth. We began to grow, and God sent us miracles. One of the provisionary miracles that always comes to my mind when I think about the early days of Wisner was I had rented a post office box down at the post office, and I would walk down to the post office and get our mail. And one Monday morning, not long after we got there, we had money to buy groceries usually, but not much else. And so on that Monday morning, I went down and opened the mailbox, box 186, downtown Wisner, and there was a plain white envelope in there that I opened, and it had a small amount of money, $30-something in it, and cash. There was no return address on the envelope, and so I was thankful for it. Went home, and we bought groceries that week for $30-something. Bought plenty of groceries for us for the week for that. For many, many weeks after that, every Monday morning, I would go to the post office and get that plain white envelope, handwritten, Reverend Charles R. Nugent, P.O. Box 186, Wisner, Louisiana. And I got that, never knew where it came from, knew it came by God's design. I knew it came by God's supply. I didn't know who God used to do it. I didn't know but what there was an angel who did it. I never knew. But I fully accepted it as God's provision. And we bought groceries with that money for years. And when the church began to grow, one morning I went fully expecting my envelope to be there, and it was not there. That well dried up, and the ravens didn't come, but we had enough money to buy groceries, and God was divinely taking care of us. And He did that over and over during those years that we were there. We were there 11 years. We constantly built buildings, not great buildings. We remodeled that church and made it larger. I borrowed about $30,000, I believe, down at the bank by this time to do a total remodel and enlargement on the building. And we made it bigger. We didn't make it fancy because $30,000 wouldn't do that in those days, but it did make it bigger. And it wasn't long after that, we felt a burden for a school, and we borrowed more money, built a school building, a very nice school building, still there today. Simple, plain metal building, but it was very serviceable, and God blessed it. Not long after that, we felt the need for a family life center, a gymnasium with a kitchen, both to serve the school and the church. And we were able to go and build that. We took up most of the money in cash to build that, and people in the church built it. We had iron workers in the church. We had strong families by now who worked hard to help us build those buildings. Thank God He provided. We had strong families. The Roberts family, there were several of them who were very strong in our building there. The Jordans were there, very strong. Tom, he bought us the first mobile home and let us use it as long as we were there. The Wilkes families were strong families in the church. Many, many others. I shouldn't call names, but those names come to my mind immediately as people who stood strong with us. And in spite of the persecution, in spite of other churches not wanting us to come there, the Pentecostals in the area not very pleased with us being there. I'm sorry to say I didn't consider them at all. My focus was a young focus, but it was on God. My motives were pure, and I felt like in leaving the King's Church that it was time for us to go, that we had reaped the harvest that God sent us there for. And we went into Wisner with that same goal of reaping a bigger harvest. God bless that. God bless that. And we went from 100 to 200 and 300, and we bought buses. One time we had 4 buses. We were busing people in, and we built the church with busing and Bible studies, Sunday school, and with a lot of prayer and enthusiasm. God sent us people, strong people that stood with us, and we were there 11 years. Did a total remodel on the church one more time, and the church was beautiful. It was like new inside, and God helped us to do it.